Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. In today's session, we're looking at a question from one of our Kalyana Mittas, and they write, I've read about faith followers, saddhānusari, and Dhamma followers, dhammanusari, in the Kitagiri Sutta. This is in Majjhima Nikaya Discourse number 70. Also in the Cetana Sutta, which is in Samyutta Nikaya chapter 25, Discourse number 7, the Buddha says faith followers and Dhamma followers have entered the fixed course of rightness, entered the plane of superior persons, transcended the plane of the worldlings. They are incapable of doing any deed, by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the domain of hungry ghosts. According to the Buddha, both saddhanusari and dhammanusari are incapable of passing away until they have realized the fruit of stream entry. And there are modern teachers who mention about cula-sotapanna, a future stream enterer from the commentaries, as a goal well worth striving for. Could you please throw some light on these? So we can certainly answer and look at some of these things that the Buddha talks about. And one of the things about saddha to begin with is I'll use interchangeably saddha as faith, but also as conviction or confidence, because faith sometimes gives the idea that it's blind faith. But what we know from looking at saddha, and particularly the good quality of saddha, as well as the spiritual faculty and all those sorts of things, saddha goes beyond that. It's actually around conviction and having confidence in the Buddha. Let's begin by looking at the Kitagiri Sutta. This is Majjhima Nikaya Discourse number 70. And let's start with the 7 kinds of persons that the Buddha talks about. So the first is one liberated in both ways, ubbato bhaga vimutto. Then the second is one liberated by wisdom, panya vimutto. The third is a body witness, kaya sakhi. The fourth is one attained to view, dittipatto. The fifth is one liberated by faith or conviction, saddha vimutto. And then the last 2, a Dhamma follower, dhammanusari, and a faith follower or follower by conviction, saddhanusari. When you look at this list of 7, the first 2 are clearly those that are liberated, attain nibbana, and they've attained nibbana in different ways. The next 3 are the ones that have had attainments. So they haven't finished it off, they haven't been liberated, but they have attained path and fruit to some degree. And then the last 2, the Dhamma follower and the faith follower, these are the 2 that are on the cusp, that haven't quite reached stream entry, path and fruit of stream entry, but they are close and they are leaning towards it with certain spiritual faculties developed. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, the interesting thing, which we'll see when we go through the suttas, is that Buddha says that one who is a faith follower or follower by conviction, saddhanusari, when they enter the stream, they are said to be one liberated by faith, so saddha vimutto. So that's the 5th one on the list. And a Dhamma follower, dhammanusari, they are one who attained to view when they enter the stream. So that's the interesting thing about this list. What's clear to see is that saddhanusari and dhammanusari, the spiritual faculties are the ones that are driving development of path and fruit. And what we'll see when we go through is a bit more about these spiritual faculties. Let's begin with saddhanusari, so the faith follower or follower by conviction. And the Buddha says, what kind of person is a faith follower? Here some person does not contact with the body and abide in those liberations that are peaceful and immaterial, transcending forms, and his taints are not yet destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. Yet he has sufficient confidence in and conviction for the Tathagata. Furthermore, he has these qualities, the faith faculty, the energy faculty, the mindfulness faculty, the concentration faculty, and the wisdom faculty. This kind of person is called a faith follower. And then it goes on to say that, I say of such a bhikkhu that he still has work to do with diligence. Why is that? Because when that venerable one makes use of certain resting places and associates with good friends and nurtures his spiritual faculties, he may, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge in the present life, enter upon and abide in that supreme goal of the holy life for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. Seeing this fruit of diligence for such a bhikkhu, I say that he still has work to do with diligence. So what we can see from the Buddha's explanation about saddhānusari is that the predominant faculty is really about faith or conviction, confidence, particularly in the Tathagata. That when you think about what gives conviction for the Tathagata, it is about his perfect enlightenment and noble qualities and accomplishments. So saddhanusari, they will practice and develop on the noble path out of conviction towards the Buddha, and they will enter the stream with this leading at the forefront. When you have conviction towards the Buddha, the other things follow. The conviction towards the Dhamma, the conviction towards the noble Sangha, that also follows. What we'll look at is the spiritual faculties, because in essence, this is what is most important in the development, and why we do certain meditations is actually to sharpen our spiritual faculties. So when you look at someone who is saddhanusari, the reason that they would keep sila, like their virtue, is out of conviction and faith towards the Buddha. Likewise, why they would do certain meditations when they're given instructions, it is also for that reason. So if they continuously develop on the Noble Eightfold Path, then they will come to distinction. And by distinction, we mean attainment. They will enter the stream. What will be interesting as we go along is when we look at the factors that lead to stream entry, then this is what the Buddha is actually talking about, that if you associate with good friends or good company, if you nurture the spiritual faculties, if you practice in accordance with the Dhamma, if you listen to the true Dhamma, if you have wise contemplation, then these are the things that work in your favor in order for you to enter the stream. What's very interesting about saddhanusari is going to a village in rural Sri Lanka as an example, and you give them instruction, you read out a sutta, you give them instruction about how to meditate on that sutta, and you wouldn't think that they would be able to attain concentration or be able to be successful in the meditation. But because of the qualities of conviction, faith in Buddha, faith in Dhamma, faith in Sangha, they are easy to instruct, and they don't think too deeply whether they understand the Dhamma or not. They just follow the instructions. And so what you see is that they get quite concentrated quite quickly. And it's quite delightful to see, because in that way you can kind of understand that this person is someone out of conviction towards the Buddha. They are on the right track. And that's not to say that there are no people in urban centers who are like this. There are also people like that too. But this is the most obvious example. Often you hear people talking about in Thailand or Myanmar or even Sri Lanka, that there are people that you just wouldn't expect, but their minds concentrate so easily when you give them the instructions of the Buddha. So what happens is, when we looked at the list of 7 kinds of persons, there was one that was one liberated by faith. It's the one just above the Dhamma-follower. And so the Buddha says, the one who is liberated by faith, this is a person who does not contact with the body and abide in those liberations that are peaceful and immaterial, transcending forms. But some of his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom, and his faith is planted, rooted, and established in the Tathagata. This kind of person is called one liberated by faith. So this person has clearly attained. So attained stream entry, attained maybe once return, or maybe even attained non-return. So some of the taints have been destroyed because out of faith they've followed the instructions of the Buddha and they've seen directly for themselves in their meditation with wisdom, and so they've destroyed some of the fetters. Now, when that's the case, if you are a saddhanusari, if you rely predominantly on the faculty of conviction or faith, this activates the other spiritual faculties and you attain the fruit of stream entry as one liberated by faith or conviction. In the case of dhammanusari, then we have the Dhamma-follower. And the Buddha says, what kind of person is a Dhamma-follower? Here some person does not contact with the body and abide in those liberations that are peaceful and immaterial, transcending forms, and his taints are not yet destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. But those teachings proclaimed by the Tathagata are accepted by him after reflecting on them sufficiently with wisdom. Furthermore, he has these qualities: the faith faculty, the energy faculty, the mindfulness faculty, the concentration faculty, and the wisdom faculty. This kind of person is called a Dhamma-follower. And the Buddha goes on in the same way that he described with a faith follower about diligence. In the case of dhammanusari, it's really the predominant faculty is the wisdom faculty. So it comes from the panya indriya, from an understanding of the Dhamma. So when it comes to the practice and the development of the Noble Eightfold Path, dhammanusari does so out of wisdom from directly experiencing the Dhamma. They follow instructions, they keep sila based on this connection with the Dhamma. And so it leads to path and fruit of stream entry if they continue to follow the instructions of the Buddha, if they associate with the good persons, if they practice in accordance with the Dhamma, if they wisely continue to contemplate and they hear the true Dhamma. But at some point when wisdom grows, so does saddha, so does the conviction, because you see the results for yourself and it does increase the other faculties. And we're going to go a little deeper into spiritual faculties, because when you sharpen your spiritual faculties, whether they're blunt or whether they're sharp already, this goes a long way towards being able to enter the stream. That's why when we talk about doing sutta meditations, it's good to be able to do these meditations on your own. You start to sharpen the spiritual faculties and they all get activated. So if you activate one, the rest will follow. So you activate, say, in the case of saddhanusari, the one that leads is the conviction faculty, but the other faculties get activated when that one is leading. Likewise with dhammanusari, the person who has a stronger panya indriya, the wisdom faculty, then the other factors also get activated because you need them. You need energy, you need concentration, you need mindfulness, and you need conviction and also wisdom. So they all get activated to work together to help you to develop the path. Now, these spiritual faculties, these indriyas, we need them the whole way through, right up until the end. So the more that you develop in the Dhamma, the better it is towards attainment on the path. The way the dhammanusari, the Dhamma-follower, attains fruit of stream entry is through one attained to view. So the Buddha says, what kind of person is one attained to view? Here some person does not contact with the body and abide in those liberations that are peaceful and immaterial, transcending forms, but some of those taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. And he has reviewed and examined with wisdom the teachings proclaimed by the Tathagata. This kind of person is called one attained to view. So when it comes to this particular person, they activate the rest of the spiritual faculties by the faculty of wisdom. And so in this way, when you directly experience the teachings and you contemplate them, review them, examine them, and then you directly see the eye of the Dhamma arises through seeing with wisdom, then that's when some of the taints are destroyed. So this could apply to stream entry, it could also be once return, it could also be non-return. Clearly, what is very important in terms of dhammanusari and saddhanusari is the development of the 5 spiritual faculties. So in both cases, they have either blunt or slightly sharp spiritual faculties. And what is key is to continue to develop them. So let's refresh our minds about these 5 spiritual faculties or pancha indriya. And the Buddha says, bhikkhus, there are these 5 faculties. What 5? The faculties of conviction, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And what bhikkhus is the faculty of conviction or faith? Here, bhikkhus, the noble disciple is a person of conviction, one who has conviction in the enlightenment of the Tathagata thus. That blessed one is an arahant, fully enlightened, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of devas and humans, the enlightened one, the blessed one. This is called the faculty of conviction. So in Pali we know this as the Itipiso Gata. And what is the faculty of energy? Here, bhikkhus, the noble disciple dwells with energy aroused for the abandoning of unwholesome states and the acquisition of wholesome states. He is strong, firm in exertion, not shirking the responsibility of cultivating wholesome states. This is called the faculty of energy. And what is the faculty of mindfulness? Here, bhikkhus, the noble disciple is mindful, possessing supreme mindfulness and discretion, one who remembers and recollects what was done and said long ago. This is called the faculty of mindfulness. And what is the faculty of concentration? Here, bhikkhus, the noble disciple gains concentration, gains one-pointedness of mind, having made release the object. This is called the faculty of concentration. And what is the faculty of wisdom? Here, bhikkhus, the noble disciple is wise. He possesses wisdom directed to the arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, leading to the complete destruction of suffering. This is called the faculty of wisdom. So these are the faculties that need to be developed, to be sharpened, so they help us right up until the end, to the final liberation, towards Nibbana. So in the case of Dhammanusari and saddhānusari, you can see which one is predominant. So Dhammanusari, the predominant faculty, is wisdom. That's the one that leads, and the other ones will get activated as a result of that. And in the case of saddhānusari, the faculty of conviction is the one that leads, and the other faculties get activated as a result. And so they all work together to aid towards the path, the development of the path, and towards attainment, eventual attainment. And the Buddha does talk about the development of these 5 spiritual faculties, and in terms of how well they are completed or fulfilled. The Buddha says in the Patipanna Sutta, this is Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 48, discourse number 18. So he introduces the 5 faculties, and then he says, one who has completed and fulfilled these 5 faculties is an arahant. So that means someone who's completely developed them, completely fulfilled them. But then if they are weaker than that, one is practicing for the realization of the fruit of arahantship. If still weaker, one is a non-returner. If still weaker, one is practicing for the realization of the fruit of non-returning. If still weaker, one is a once-returner. If still weaker, one is practicing for the realization of the fruit of once-returning. If still weaker, one is a stream enterer. If still weaker, one is practicing for the realization of the fruit of stream entry. But bhikkhus, I say that one in whom these 5 faculties are completely and totally absent is an outsider who stands in the faction of worldlings. So where does dhammanusari and saddhānusari sit? Well, it sits as one who is practicing for the realization of the fruit of stream entry. So they are there, but they're weak and they need to be further developed. And so at its penultimate development, it is the arahant. So when we develop the Noble Eightfold Path and all the different bodhipakya factors, what we are doing is we're sharpening in order to complete the path. When we are easy to instruct and we follow the instructions of the Buddha in the suttas, and we do it in a sequential manner, we memorize also the Dhamma, we discuss and we do all the things towards learning the Dhamma correctly, then this goes a long way towards sharpening our spiritual faculties. When you start to get to the level of attainment and you look at what is there for the ones that have attained, they are still sharpening the spiritual faculties. As you can see from the Buddha's explanation here, as you sharpen the spiritual faculties, you keep progressing on the path. Let's now look at learning ability, and let's go to the Ugadittanyu Sutta. This is Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 4, discourse number 133. It's a very short teaching. The Buddha says, bhikkhus, these 4 people are found in the world. What for? One who understands quickly, Ugadittanyu, one who understands through elaboration, Vipanchittanyu, one who needs to be guided, Neyo, and one for whom the word is maximum, Pada-paramo. These are the 4 people found in the world. Now, the reason this is quite interesting is because if you look at this list, all of us want to be the first one, the one who understands quickly. But unfortunately, we're not. We fall into one of the other 3 categories. Let's just explain what they are. So, Ugadittanyu means you understand quickly. It's said that the breakthrough to the Dhamma is quick because it occurs together with the utterance. So when you hear it, you get the breakthrough, the eye of the Dhamma at that point. In terms of Vipanchittanyu, which is understanding through elaboration, apparently the breakthrough to the Dhamma occurs when the meaning of what has been stated briefly is being analysed in detail. So for example, when you see Venerable Mahakachana explain to the bhikkhus or explain to even lay people when they ask a question, a short statement made by the Buddha, he explains it in detail. The breakthrough comes after that explanation, that helps you. So that's vipanchitanyu. And then one who needs to be guided, neo. This is really the breakthrough comes gradually. It's through instruction, through questioning, through wise contemplation, and also reliance on good friends. So this takes more work, more effort in order to understand and get the breakthrough in the Dhamma. And then the last one is the word is maximum. So in this case, you hear a lot of Dhamma, you recite a lot of Dhamma, and you retain a lot in your mind. Despite all that, you don't reach the breakthrough to the Dhamma in the present life. What's interesting is where dhammanusari and saddhānusari lie within these 4 different types of people. What is said in the Pethakopadesa is that a Dhamma-follower, dhammanusari, is one who understands through elaboration, vipanchitanyu. The breakthrough happens by the elaboration on the Dhamma. So something that has been analysed in detail, and then that person contemplates and turns it in their mind and then has a direct experience of it. So that is Dhamma-follower. In the case of a faith follower or a follower by conviction, saddhanusari, it happens through neo, so through guidance. So that means the breakthrough comes when you're instructed, you ask questions and they're answered, wise contemplation, and then relying on good friends, kalyanamitta, to pull you along. So these are the things that show the different methods of learning. And it's understandable because when it comes to a Dhamma follower, clearly the faculties may be slightly sharper. When you look at the list of 7, the faith follower is right at the bottom, whereas Dhamma follower is above that. So it may lend itself to that explanation. So let's now go to chapter 25 of Samyutta Nikaya. And the person who asked the question was talking about one of the discourses in this chapter, and it was discourse number 7. But this part of the question really relates to all 10 of them, because it talks about different things that are seen as impermanent, changing and becoming otherwise. Within the 10 different discourses, it talks about sense faculties, it talks about sense objects, the 6 kinds of consciousness, the 6 kinds of contact, the 6 kinds of feeling, the 6 kinds of perception, volition, craving, elements, and of course the 5 aggregates. So in each of these cases, they're talking about when you see them as impermanent, changing and becoming otherwise, so there's some kind of alteration that you directly see, then the Buddha says one who has conviction towards the Dhamma and resolves on them thus is called a faith follower or follower by conviction. One who has entered upon the fixed course of rightness, entered the plane of good persons, transcended the plane of the worldlings. He is incapable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the domain of ghosts. He is incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry. And then in the case of a Dhamma follower, one for whom this Dhamma is accepted thus, after being pondered to a sufficient degree with wisdom, is called the Dhamma follower. One who has entered upon the fixed course of rightness, and so on and so forth, the same as for the faith follower. And then lastly, the Buddha says, one who knows and sees the Dhamma thus is called a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny with enlightenment as his destination. So there's 3 distinct things that the Buddha is talking about here. The first is the faith follower, saddhanusari. You accept these different teachings of the Buddha about sense faculties, sense objects, aggregates, all of that sort of thing, as impermanent, changing, and become otherwise. So you're entering upon the fixed course of rightness, entering to the plane of good persons, transcended the plane of worldlings. So there's something that has connected in the Dhamma with you, although you haven't quite attained the fruit of stream entry at this point. So there's no lower realms. Same with the Dhamma follower. The Dhamma follower again sees these things as impermanent, changing, and otherwise after pondering and applying wisdom. So again, the same thing. On the fixed course of rightness and all that, but hasn't realized the fruit of stream entry yet. Now, the third one is the one that knows and sees the Dhamma and is called a stream enterer. So in this case, the distinction that you see between Dhammanusari, saddhanusari, and the stream enterer is that the stream enterer clearly knows and sees this for what it is, and they have tipped over to realize stream entry. The question that you would ask is, why is it not the same for Dhammanusari and saddhanusari? And this is because they haven't known and seen it directly for themselves. They haven't seen it fully. They've partially seen it, one out of conviction and one out of Dhamma, wisdom faculty, understanding. But they are on the right path now because they're coming closer. What you could say is that it would only take a little bit more to tip them over. Because in the case of a stream enterer, what's happened is they've partially lifted the door bar of ignorance. So the Buddha always talks about this door bar or crossbar of ignorance. When you fully lift it, that means you're an arahant. But when you have path and fruit of any of the other ones, then you partially lift it. So in the case of stream entry, you partially lift it because you know and see the truth and you've removed certain fetters. So when it comes to dhammanusari and saddhanusari, that is not the case yet, but you're close. You're in the vicinity. You're leaning towards it. And so it may only take slightly more. In the case of saddhanusari, if you keep practicing the Noble Eightfold Path and you keep associating with the right persons, if you keep following the right instructions of the Buddha, at some point you would be tipped over. And the reason you would continue to do it is out of conviction. That is what is leading your path to progress. In the case of a Dhamma-follower, it is slightly different in the sense that you would do it because you've already seen something in the Dhamma itself, that you got the good result, and you realize if I persist, then I can attain path and fruit of stream entry. And so what happens is, out of that direct insight, that wisdom, you keep persisting at following the instructions of the Buddha, associating with the right people, looking for the true Dhamma, and then at some point you'll be tipped over based on the degree of wisdom that you've applied. And so that is the distinction. And at that point, the breakthrough comes and the door bar of ignorance is partially lifted. Now, when it comes to the question about cula-sotapanna, clearly this is something that appears in the commentaries. And when you look through the discourses and the utterances and all the ninefold division of the Buddha's teaching, you don't actually find reference to this particular Pali word. But what is interesting, and this is something that you can infer, and if we look at the sutta that we most recently looked at, so this was about thoroughly learning the Dhamma. And what's interesting about this particular sutta is you can see that someone has not entered the stream, but because of thoroughly learning, they're on the right track. And so if they ascend upwards, what is interesting is that that is when they reach distinction. So by distinction, we normally mean attainments. If we refresh our minds about this particular sutta, so the Sota Anugata Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya chapter 4, discourse number 191, we just recently went through it. The Buddha says there are 4 benefits to be expected when one has followed the Dhamma on hearing, recited verbally and practiced them, examined them carefully with the mind, and penetrated them well by right view, having passed away muddled in mind, and is reborn into a certain group of devas. So in this case, it's not that these people are dhammanusari or saddhanusari, because clearly what the Buddha has said is if you are dhammanusari or saddhanusari, you would realize the fruit of stream entry in the present life. So you wouldn't pass away until you had attained that. But in the case of a cula-sotapanna, what could be potentially said is that you have thoroughly learned the Dhamma, but you haven't had the breakthrough. And so when that's the case, you may pass away muddled in mind, and if you're lucky, because of your practice, you're reborn, you've ascended upwards and reborn in the company of devas. So in that case, what the Buddha says is there, the happy ones recite passages of the Dhamma to him, or a bhikkhu with psychic potency who has attained mastery of mind teaches the Dhamma to assembly of devas, and it occurs to him, this is the Dhamma and discipline in which I formerly lived the spiritual life. Or a young deva teaches the Dhamma to an assembly of devas, it occurs to him, this is the Dhamma and discipline in which I formerly lived the spiritual life. And then the 4th one is, one being who has been spontaneously reborn reminds another who has been spontaneously reborn. Do you remember, dear sir, do you remember where we formerly lived the spiritual life? And the other says, I remember, dear sir, I remember. And the arising of his memory begins as sluggish, but then that being quickly reaches distinction or attainment. When you think about a potential cula-sotapanna, then this could be what happens. You attend to the teaching thoroughly in this life, and you may not attain fruit or stream entry, but because of your practice, you ascend upwards. Because you're generous, you keep sila, and you understand the teachings to a certain degree. You've been able to memorize them, be able to recite them, and be able to practice them to a certain extent, but with no breakthrough. The potential is that when you ascend upwards, you get sparked. You get sparked by hearing the recitation of the Dhamma, or by a bhikkhu who comes to teach, or by a young deva who teaches, or by someone who you know before and reminds you about the Dhamma and discipline that has been practiced before. Given that cula-sotapanna is not referred to in the actual discourses, just bear in mind this is a potential way of looking at it. There's another reference to the benefit of thorough learning, which comes in the Pethakopadesa in the 2nd chapter. And what's interesting about this is it talks about attainment in the present life, as well as attainment in future. And so this is quite interesting because it has the same kind of reference about thorough learning, so following the Dhamma on hearing, reciting verbally and practicing, examining carefully with the mind, and penetrating the world by right view. Now the first benefit elaborates more. It's more like Bahusutta. So here someone has learned, heard much Dhamma, memorized and not forgotten them, recited verbally and practiced them, examined them carefully with the mind, and penetrated them well by right view. Then when he endeavors, connects and strives, he reaches distinction or attainment in the present life. So this is what we all aim for, that what we put into the practice as thorough learning, we reap the good result, the attainment in the present life. It goes on to say, and if he reaches no distinction in the present life, he reaches it when ill. The third is, and if he reaches no distinction when ill, he reaches it at the time of death. These two are when something major happens, a major break to really see and penetrate the Dhamma. These are opportunities, significant opportunities. And then the fourth is, and if he reaches no distinction at the time of death, he reaches it when coming to exist as a deva. So this is in a future existence. This in a way, it complements what we just went through in the previous sutta, where it happens in the future. So you're not able to enter the stream in this lifetime, but it happens if you ascend upwards and are in the company of devas. The fifth one is interesting as well, because it says, and if he reaches no distinction when coming to exist as a deva, then through desire and delight for Dhamma, he reaches enlightenment by himself. So this is similar to Pacceka Bodhi. That is in itself is also interesting, that as a deva, if you have this desire and delight in Dhamma, then it is possible for you to reach enlightenment on your own. What may be useful is to now look at the 4 factors for stream entry. So this is a dialogue between the Buddha and Venerable Sariputta. And it begins, then the Venerable Sariputta approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him and sat down to one side. The Blessed One then said to him, Sariputta, this is said, a factor for stream entry, a factor for stream entry. What now, Sariputta, is a factor for stream entry? And then Venerable Sariputta says, association with good persons. So in Pali this is Sapurisa Sangsevo, Venerable Sir, is a factor for stream entry. Hearing the true Dhamma, Sadhamma Savanang, is a factor for stream entry. Wise contemplation, Yoniso Manasikaro, is a factor for stream entry. Practice in accordance with the Dhamma, Dhammanu Dhamma Patipati, is a factor for stream entry. So why this is useful is, these are the things that would help Dhammanusari and saddhanusari to enter the stream. If the Dhamma-follower and the faith follower associate with good persons, and usually this means persons that are virtuous, persons that are developing the noble path, persons that are familiar with the true Dhamma, then this is very helpful. The second one is hearing the true Dhamma. If you are around the good persons, if you're around the wise, then you will hear the true Dhamma. What is often recommended is to be around people who are wiser than you. So always be with the wise, not the foolish, particularly when it comes to wanting to progress on the Dhamma path. And so if you have good friends who are wiser, or you are able to listen to the good Dhamma from someone who can explain what the Buddha is talking about, or enunciate the important parts of an insight pathway, or how to meditate, or how to solve problems in the meditation, or in the development of the Noble Eightfold Path, it's very useful. But of course, hearing the true Dhamma is key, because if we do that, then we can go to the next thing, which is to wisely contemplate. Now, wisely contemplating, as we know, means you need to know certain things. You need to know what are the perversions, the vipalasas, knowing how to correct the perversions, knowing what is right view, knowing how to activate the Noble Eightfold Path, knowing the medicine for when there are the hindrances, the defilements, things like that. So if you are around people and listening to the true Dhamma, then you can wisely contemplate. And that is very beneficial to the path, because you correct any wrong views and wrong practice, wrong path. And then of course, practice in accordance with the Dhamma. And I think when it comes to saddhānusari and dhammanusari, this is what the Buddha recommends. So when we were reading out the descriptions in the Kitagiri Sutta, this is what the Buddha was saying. If you associate with good persons and you practice in accordance with the true Dhamma, then it really enables you to tip over. And that's the thing, when you are saddhanusari and dhammanusari, you have the spiritual faculties that can be activated, that can be sharpened. And so it may not take much to tip you over, which is why the Buddha says you're incapable of passing away until realizing the fruit of stream entry. When you think about it, if you keep precepts and you're cultivating the wholesome, you are virtuous by body, speech and mind, really it's because you have the right view about karma, about rebirth. You've arrived at the level of the good person and you've transcended the one of the bad person. You wouldn't do any particular deed that would make you be reborn in any of the lower realms. The last part to this Dutiya Sariputta Sutta, the Buddha asks Venerable Sariputta, Sariputta, this is said, the stream, what now Sariputta is the stream? And then Venerable Sariputta answers, this Noble Eightfold Path, Venerable Sir, is the stream. That is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right concentration. And the Buddha responds by saying, good, good, Sariputta, and repeats the same thing. Then he says, Sariputta, this is said, a stream enterer, a stream enterer. What now, Sariputta, is a stream enterer? And the Venerable Sariputta answers, one who possesses this Noble Eightfold Path, Venerable Sir, is a stream enterer, this Venerable One of such a name and clan. So when you look at the answers that the Buddha and Venerable Sariputta are saying, what we know is that to enter the stream, we must possess the Noble Eightfold Path, because the Noble Eightfold Path is the stream. Why is it the stream? It's the stream because we know that it is the way out of the whole mass of suffering. In order to find our way out, to enter the path, we need to develop abandoning the wrong view and having the right view. From the right view, we have the right intention, and then we correct our conduct through body, speech and mind. So right speech, right action, right livelihood. We make right effort and apply right mindfulness in order to do so. And we come to the right concentration. So this is the Noble Eightfold Path. When we do that, we are developing the fourfold development. So we've talked about this before. Bhavatakaya, development of the body. Bhavata Sila, development of virtue. Bhavata Chitta, development of the mind. And Bhavata Panya, development of wisdom. So these different things within the Noble Eightfold Path help us to complete that. And as we are doing that, as we continue to progress and develop, the Noble Eightfold Path becomes the Tenfold Path, because with right concentration, what we result in is right knowledge and therefore right liberation. So that is how we ultimately complete the path. So from the perspective of Dhamma-nusari and saddhānusari, what one needs to do is to ensure that you are developing the Noble Eightfold Path. If you walk the Noble Eightfold Path, you come to possess it. And it is through the Noble Eightfold Path that you abandon the plane of the worldling and you enter into the plane of the good persons, the noble ones. We can close by looking at the last part of the Kitagiri Sutta. And the Buddha has these lovely words to remind us. And it really brings a lot of the things together. So the Buddha says, Bhikkhus, I do not say that final knowledge is achieved all at once. On the contrary, final knowledge is achieved by gradual training, by gradual practice, by gradual progress. So Anapuba Sikha is gradual training, Anapuba Kiriya is gradual practice, Anapuba Patipada is gradual progress. And then the Buddha says, and how is final knowledge achieved? By gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Here, one who has conviction towards a teacher visits him. When he visits him, he pays respect to him. When he pays respect to him, he gives ear. One who gives ear hears the Dhamma. Having heard the Dhamma, he memorizes it. He examines the meaning of the teachings he has memorized. When he examines their meaning, he gains a reflective acceptance of those teachings. When he has gained a reflective acceptance of those teachings, zeal springs up in him. When zeal has sprung up, he applies his will. Having applied his will, he scrutinizes. Having scrutinized, he strives. Resolutely striving, he realizes with the body the supreme truth and sees it by penetrating it with wisdom. So there's a lot there actually when you look at the culmination of what it means to train, to practice, and to progress. A lot of it involves thorough learning. A lot of it involves association with good persons. A lot of it involves true Dhamma. A lot of it involves contemplation, memorization, and of course practice. When you dedicate to this gradual process of training, practice, and progress, and learning at the heart of it, then you know that one will realize liberation at the end of it. Final knowledge can be achieved. And the path for all of us, even with this question about being a faith follower or a Dhamma follower or any one of those 7 persons, it's really about having that noble aspiration for attainment. Because as we said many times, that noble aspiration is a kusala. It is a wholesome thing. It's wholesome to have that aspiration to enter the stream and to develop further attainments. Because at the heart of it, when you enter the stream, you have safety. As we said, as we've seen from the suttas, when you have that safety, you are no longer subject to infinite suffering. Instead, maximum of 7 lives. And so that is something that is a worthwhile guarantee. And you're no longer bound for the lower realms, no longer bound for that kind of suffering. So there's something there. And even with dhammanusari and saddhanusari, the fact that due to one's practice, leading with the spiritual faculties, that you are no longer bound for lower realms, that is also very, very beneficial. So if anything, this is an encouragement towards practice, towards gradual training, gradual practice, gradual progress, and to ensure that no matter what practice you're doing in terms of the Buddha's teachings, that you understand the importance of the spiritual faculties and sharpening them, developing them, because they will enable you towards entering the stream if you haven't entered already. And if you have entered and you have attainments, then the further sharpening will enable you to attain further distinction. We can end our session here. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem, wishing you well. Teruvan Saranai.